25 Worst Junkies in Black Music History. Did you know that some of the most legendary black musicians icons who shaped entire genres were secretly battling demons that fame couldn't fix? Behind the platinum records and standing ovations were overdoses, relapses, and silent cries for help the world ignored. From heroin-filled hotel rooms to prison cells and near-death comebacks, this isn't the version of music history they teach you. This is the raw, uncomfortable truth. Before you hear the first name on this list, ask yourself, how many legends did we lose because no one dared to intervene? Hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. The stories here don't get sugar-coated. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston's rise was nothing short of meteoric. Born into a family of gospel greatness, daughter of Cissy Houston and cousin to Dionne Warwick, she was groomed for stardom from the start. By the mid-1980s, she had become a global sensation, earning multiple Grammys and setting records with her breathtaking vocals. Her rendition of I Will Always Love You remains one of the best-selling singles of all time, a testament to her unmatched vocal control and emotional depth. But behind the flawless performances was a woman spiraling into a private abyss. Fame came with crushing expectations. With every award and standing ovation, Whitney's world behind the scenes grew darker. The intense scrutiny from tabloids, industry pressures, and the complex dynamics of her personal life, especially her volatile marriage to Bobby Brown, created a toxic environment that fed into substance abuse. By the early 1990s, Houston was regularly using cocaine, marijuana, and prescription pills. Her decline was slow but visible. She began missing shows, canceling tours, and exhibiting erratic behavior that left fans stunned and concerned. One of the most shocking moments came during a televised interview, where she appeared gaunt, distracted, and defensive, delivering the now infamous "crack is whack" remark. Yet the signs of long-term use were undeniable. Her once pristine vocals became strained, her iconic voice began to crack. Public performances turned chaotic with missed notes and slurred lyrics, tarnishing her legendary reputation. Attempts at rehabilitation were made, but none lasted. Friends and family urged her to quit, but addiction had its grip. On February 11, 2012, the world was stunned when Whitney was found lifeless in the bathtub of her Beverly Hilton hotel room. The autopsy revealed heart disease, cocaine use, and other contributing substances. She was only 48. Whitney Houston wasn't just another celebrity lost to drugs. She was an international treasure whose downfall revealed the harsh truth: brilliance offers no immunity from self-destruction. Her story isn't just about addiction. It's about a woman who gave everything to the world but never got the help she truly needed. Prince Rogers Nelson was more than a musician, he was a phenomenon. A revolutionary who defied genres, identities, and limitations. Prince could play over 24 instruments, write chart-topping songs in minutes, and command the stage with unmatched charisma. Hits like Purple Rain, When Doves Cry, and Kiss became cultural landmarks. But behind the sequin's mystery and groundbreaking creativity was a man enduring unbearable chronic pain. Years of performing elaborate choreography in high heels left Prince suffering from excruciating hip issues. His refusal to undergo surgery due to his adherence to the beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses led him down another path: powerful prescription painkillers. What started as a solution to pain management quietly evolved into a dangerous dependency. He hid it well. To fans, he remained enigmatic, eccentric, always in control. But privately, his reliance on opioids became harder to conceal. On April 21, 2016, Prince was found unresponsive in an elevator at his Paisley Park estate in Minnesota. He was just 57. The cause: an accidental overdose of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid dozens of times stronger than heroin. The pills he had taken were counterfeit, mislabeled, and far more lethal than he likely knew. What makes Prince's addiction especially tragic is that few suspected how much he was suffering. There were no wild public outbursts or dramatic falls from grace. His decline was hidden, quiet, and masked by artistry and discipline. He left behind a vault of unreleased music, but even more haunting, a legacy cut short by a silent struggle. Prince's death wasn't just a loss to the music world, it was a warning. Even brilliance can break under physical pain and isolation. His story reminds us that addiction often wears a polished face, and the most dazzling stars can still disappear in an instant if no one sees their suffering. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix didn't just play the guitar, he transformed it into an emotional language. Every riff, every solo felt like lightning. Born in Seattle and propelled to stardom in London, Hendrix changed the sound of rock and blues forever with performances at Monterey, Woodstock, and Isle of Wight. Yet beneath his magnetic presence was a man exhausted by fame and haunted by inner chaos. Hendrix's life was a whirlwind. Constant touring, media pressure, and the emotional weight of being a black man in a predominantly white rock scene led to increasing disconnection from reality. While many saw his psychedelic image as artistic expression, the truth was darker. He was using LSD, barbiturates, amphetamines, cannabis, whatever could help him escape the mental and physical toll of fame. Friends noted his increasing isolation in the final years. He would go days without sleep, miss rehearsals, and drift through conversations. His performances, while often spectacular, began to show signs of strain. Hendrix wanted to evolve musically to explore jazz and soul, but was trapped by contracts, expectations, and his own demons. On September 18, 1970, Hendrix died in London at just 27 years old. Officially, the cause was asphyxiation after taking sleeping pills and washing them down with red wine. The dosage wasn't intentional, it was confusion, fatigue, and a dangerous mix of substances in a body that couldn't take anymore. His passing added him to the tragic 27 Club, but Hendrix was more than a number. He was a soul desperate for rest, trapped in a machine that only wanted more of his genius. His addiction wasn't fueled by rebellion, it was exhaustion, disillusionment, and the loneliness of being idolized but never truly understood. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye was the voice of a generation, sensitive, seductive, and spiritually aware. Songs like What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and Mercy, Mercy Me weren't just chart toppers. They were emotional sermons. He sang of war, injustice, love, and heartbreak, weaving his inner turmoil into every lyric. But the man behind the music was living a tragedy that no melody could mend. Raised in a strict abusive household in Washington, D.C., Marvin's earliest memories were of fear and beatings at the hands of his deeply religious father. That childhood trauma never faded, it only transformed into ghosts that followed him through fame. As his career soared, so did his paranoia, depression, and dependency on substances. Cocaine, hallucinogens, and alcohol became part of his routine, used not to party, but to self-medicate a lifelong pain he could never outrun. By the late 70s, Marvin had fled the U.S., first to Hawaii and then to Europe, dodging taxes and escaping the industry's pressures. He lived like a recluse, convinced he was being watched. And yet, even in this darkness, he created Sexual Healing, a song so smooth it masked the storm brewing inside. In 1983, Marvin returned to America emotionally and financially drained. He moved in with his parents, a decision that would prove fatal. On April 1, 1984, after an argument, Marvin's father shot him with a gun Marvin had gifted him. He died a day before his 45th birthday. Marvin Gaye's addiction was rooted in deep psychological wounds. It wasn't about recklessness, it was about trying to silence the screams of a brutal past. He sang for peace, but never found his own. His voice may live on, but the pain that shaped it was real, and the system that failed to protect him still echoes in countless other lives. Ray Charles. Ray Charles lost his sight at 7, but not his vision. From the moment his fingers touched a piano, he channeled something extraordinary. An alchemy of gospel, blues, jazz, and soul that felt like divine revelation. With classics like Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road, Jack Ray didn't just perform, he transported listeners into his world. But even as the world applauded, Ray was privately numbing a devastating grief. By age 15, Ray had already endured the deaths of both his brother and mother. That profound sense of loss stayed with him. While touring the country facing racial discrimination and long nights on the road, heroin became his escape. It offered momentary stillness from an ever-whirring mind, but it also became a chain. For 17 years, Ray struggled with addiction, carefully hiding it behind dark glasses and a magnetic stage presence. The illusion crumbled in 1965 when he was arrested at a Boston airport for heroin possession. Facing the loss of his freedom and career, Ray made a life-altering choice. He entered rehab. The withdrawal was brutal, cold sweats, hallucinations, nightmares. But he emerged on the other side, clean and determined never to relapse. Unlike many others, Ray remained sober for the rest of his life. But the damage had already left its mark on his body, his relationships, and his psyche. He openly admitted that the addiction cost him years of clarity and joy. Still, he went on to become a national treasure, winning 17 Grammy Awards and earning the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ray Charles is proof that even the most towering talents can be wounded men seeking refuge. His story stands as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. He fell hard, but he got up, and in doing so, reminded the world that redemption is possible, even after the darkest chapters. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday didn't just sing the blues, she embodied them. With a voice like a fragile cry in the dark, she gave life to pain in a way no other artist could. Strange Fruit. Her haunting protest against racial lynching made her a target of both admiration and persecution. But Billie's voice, as spellbinding as it was, carried the weight of a life soaked in suffering. Born in 1915 into poverty and instability, Billie endured childhood trauma, sexual violence, and institutional neglect. By her teens, she was performing in Harlem nightclubs, and by her early 20s, she was using heroin. The drug became her anchor in a world that offered her no safety. As her fame grew, so did her torment. Touring in the Jim Crow South meant daily encounters with racism. Even as she performed for packed houses, she was barred from using the same entrances or bathrooms as her white audiences. Her heroin use became a weapon used against her. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics, led by Harry Anslinger, waged a personal crusade to destroy her. In 1947, she was arrested and jailed for possession. When she was released, she lost her cabaret license, meaning she could no longer sing in nightclubs that served alcohol, effectively killing her ability to perform in most venues. Despite declining health, Billie continued to sing with raw emotion. Her voice, once smooth, grew rougher, worn by years of trauma and drug use. In 1959, she was admitted to the hospital with liver and heart failure. Still, authorities placed her under arrest, handcuffed to her bed. Days later, she died at age 44 with just 70 cents in her bank account. Billie Holiday wasn't destroyed by heroin alone. She was dismantled by a racist, misogynistic system that criminalized her trauma. Her addiction was the consequence of pain no one helped her escape. And yet, through it all, she sang. Her voice remains a haunting reminder that behind many icons are stories of brutal survival and of battles no one should fight alone. DMX, born Earl Simmons, was hip-hop's raw nerve. With a gravel-throated growl and a wounded heart, he delivered verses like Confessions, Bleeding Rage, Sorrow, and Redemption. Albums like It's Dark and Hell is Hot and Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood captured the struggles of a man who never had peace. But behind his ferocious energy was a childhood of abandonment, abuse, and betrayal that shaped every chaotic step of his journey. DMX's introduction to addiction was one of the most heartbreaking in music history. At just 14, he was given a blunt laced with crack cocaine by a mentor, someone he trusted. From that moment, a lifelong war with addiction began. It wasn't about pleasure, it was about escape from trauma that festered since birth. Despite a record-breaking rise in the late 90s, he never outran his past. The more his fame grew, the louder his inner demons became. Courtrooms, prison cells, and rehab centers became fixtures in his life. Yet through it all, he never masked his pain. In songs like Slippin', he spoke candidly about how hard it was just to survive another day. Unlike many stars who denied their struggles, DMX confronted his publicly. He cried on camera, prayed during interviews, and spoke about God and redemption with unwavering intensity. But addiction kept pulling him back. He relapsed repeatedly, each time apologizing to his fans, each time vowing to rise again. On April 2, 2021, DMX suffered a drug-induced heart attack. After a week in a coma, he died at age 50. The world mourned not just the loss of a rapper, but of a deeply human soul who never stopped fighting. DMX wasn't glamorized in his addiction. He laid it bare. He showed the world what trauma looks like when it goes untreated, and how even a lion can be broken when the pain runs too deep. His legacy is one of brutal honesty and spiritual defiance. He didn't survive, but he never surrendered, and in that, he remains immortal. Mary J. Blige. Mary J. Blige earned the title Queen of Hip-Hop Soul by turning her deepest wounds into musical anthems. Her voice, gritty, emotional, and unfiltered, told the story of a woman fighting through storms few could see. From My Life to No More Drama. She didn't just sing about struggle, she lived it. Born and raised in the tough projects of Yonkers, New York, Mary grew up surrounded by dysfunction. Her childhood was scarred by molestation, poverty, and the absence of emotional safety. Music became her only refuge. But when fame arrived, it didn't bring healing. Instead, it magnified the pain. With pressure mounting and old traumas unhealed, Mary turned to substances, alcohol, cocaine, and self-destructive relationships. The 90s were both her breakthrough and her breakdown. As her albums topped charts and won awards, she was simultaneously spiraling behind the scenes. Public appearances were unpredictable. She'd slur her words, lash out emotionally, or disappear entirely. Her toxic relationship with fellow singer Casey Haley of Jodeci only deepened her despair, fueling a cycle of abuse and substance use. Mary has openly spoken about waking up with no memory of the night before, of crying in silence and using alcohol just to feel something or nothing at all. But her story took a turn. Most don't. She survived. She got clean, found therapy, and leaned into her faith. It wasn't a Hollywood-style overnight transformation. It was years of incremental change, of falling and getting back up again. Today, Mary J. Blige is more than a singer. She's a living testament to resilience. She's been nominated for Oscars, headlined Super Bowl halftime shows, and opened up publicly about her mental health. Her success is no longer just about music, but about the power of reclaiming your life. Mary's battle with addiction wasn't about fame corrupting talent, it was about childhood pain that never healed. She clawed her way out of the darkness not because she had to, but because she refused to die there. Rick James. Rick James was funk royalty, loud, flamboyant, and untamed. With braids, glittery boots, and hits like Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby. He carved out a persona that radiated rebellion. But behind the glam rock persona was a man devoured by excess, spiraling into one of the most infamous drug-fueled meltdowns in music history. Born James Ambrose Johnson, Jr. Rick's life was unstable from the start. After a string of arrests and a brief stint in the Navy, he found his calling in music. When stardom hit in the late 70s and early 80s, it hit hard. With immense success came unrestrained indulgence. Cocaine became his constant companion, joined by crack alcohol and hallucinogens. He once bragged about spending $7,000 a week on drugs. Unlike others who hid their vices, Rick flaunted his chaos. His parties were legendary for their excess nude guests, bottomless champagne, and open drug use. But the fun had a dark core. His behavior became erratic, violent, and paranoid. In the early 90s, he and his girlfriend were convicted of imprisoning and assaulting 2 women during separate drug binges. He served time in prison, a dramatic fall from his once dominant place in music. Even after his release, Rick struggled to reclaim his footing. He tried a comeback, poking fun at his wild past on shows like Chappelle's Show, where his catchphrase, "I'm Rick James, boxer," became iconic. But behind the humor, he remained a man deeply damaged by decades of addiction. In 2004, Rick James died at 56. The coroner found 9 drugs in his system, including methamphetamine, cocaine, Valium, and Xanax. Though none were in lethal quantities individually, the cocktail proved fatal. Rick James was a man of enormous talent and equal self-destruction. His legacy is a cautionary tale about unchecked fame, addictive personalities, and the thin line between pleasure and pain. He made the world dance, but his own rhythm was set to chaos. His story is not just about funk, it's about the fire that burns when no one stops the music. Sly Stone. Sly Stone wasn't just a musician, he was a revolution. As the frontman of Sly and the Family Stone, he pioneered a genre-bending sound that fused funk rock soul and psychedelia. Anthems like Everyday People and Dance to the Music weren't just hits, they were rallying cries for unity and change. But the man behind the movement began falling apart at the height of his influence. In the late 1960s, Sly was a visionary leader of a multicultural, gender-inclusive band in a racially divided America. But the pressure to be both a political symbol and a commercial success wore on him. Behind the studio magic, paranoia crept in. Sly began carrying weapons, isolating himself from the band, and obsessing over betrayal, real or imagined. To stay awake and keep the creativity flowing, he turned to cocaine and PCP. Eventually, the drugs took control. Rehearsals were missed, concerts were canceled last minute, infuriating promoters and fans. Bandmates quit one by one. By 1975, Sly's grip on his music and his mind had unraveled. He became a recluse, appearing sporadically throughout the 80s and 90s in bizarre, incoherent interviews or disheveled performances. Rumors circulated that he was homeless, living in a van parked in Los Angeles, surviving on royalty checks and whispers of the past. Despite his fall, Sly Stone's legacy is undeniable. He changed the course of American music and inspired countless artists. But his story is a chilling reminder that genius can implode under pressure, and unchecked addiction doesn't just steal talent, it steals time, identity, and purpose. Today, Sly is rarely seen in public, a ghost of a man who once stood center stage calling for peace and love. The irony is cruel. He built an empire on togetherness, only to end up completely alone. His descent isn't just one of drugs, but of a man who created harmony for millions and couldn't find it for himself. Etta James. Etta James was a powerhouse. Her voice didn't ask for attention, it demanded it. From the moment At Last hit the airwaves, she became synonymous with raw passion, pain, and power. But behind that iconic sound was a woman tormented by an addiction that started before fame and nearly destroyed everything it helped her build. Born Jamesetta Hawkins in 1938, Etta's early life was defined by instability. Raised in foster care and exposed to abuse, she carried emotional scars long before she reached a recording studio. By the time she was a teenager, heroin had already entered her life. She never truly got free of it. As her career took off in the 1950s and 60s, so did her reputation, not just as a singer, but as someone spiraling out of control. She missed shows, clashed with record labels, and cycled in and out of jail for drug-related charges. Her body bore the marks of her struggles, infected veins, weight fluctuations, and the kind of fatigue no makeup could hide. She forged prescriptions, burned bridges, and often found herself penniless despite critical acclaim. Yet somehow, the voice remained. In the 1990s, after multiple stints in rehab, Etta began clawing her way back. Clean for a time, she released new music and won a Grammy in 1995. Her late career resurgence was celebrated, but it came with a cost. Years of abuse had taken a toll. She battled Alzheimer's and leukemia in her final years, and by the time she passed in 2012 at age 73, her legacy was secure, but her life had been a long, brutal battle for peace. Etta James wasn't just a singer. She was a survivor in a war with herself. Her voice could shatter silence, but it couldn't always drown out her pain. Her addiction didn't define her, but it shadowed her brightest moments. She remains a symbol of strength and vulnerability, proof that brilliance and brokenness often live side by side. Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker wasn't just a jazz musician, he was a revolution in motion. Known as Bird, Parker birthed the bebop movement with lightning-fast phrasing and harmonic complexity that redefined modern jazz. He played the saxophone with such mastery that it often felt supernatural. But behind the brilliance was a man trapped in a vicious cycle of addiction that began almost before his career did. By age 15, Parker was already experimenting with heroin. The drug became his constant long before he ever recorded a note. His relationship with substances wasn't born from fame. It predated it, rooted in trauma, insecurity, and the relentless pressure to be perfect in a racist, cutthroat industry. As his music soared, so did his dependency. Heroin followed him from city to city, stage to stage. He would pawn his saxophone for a fix, then borrow another, and still deliver a transcendent performance. Though many who worked with him marveled at his musical genius, they also feared his volatility. Missed shows, erratic behavior, and arrests became routine. He once attempted suicide and was committed to a mental institution. Yet when he played, everything stopped. His demons vanished in the sound, even if only temporarily. By the early 1950s, his body was collapsing. Alcohol compounded the damage already done by heroin. Ulcers, cirrhosis, and emotional turmoil ravaged him. In 1955, Parker died in the suite of a friend at just 34 years old. The coroner, shocked at the condition of his body, estimated his age to be over 50. Charlie Parker's addiction wasn't hidden, it was painfully public. And though he redefined a genre, he couldn't outrun the pain that fueled his art. He was a legend. Yes, but also a warning. Talent that burns that hot rarely burns long. Bird gave the world flight even as he fell apart mid-air. Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson once ruled the airwaves as the silky-voiced lead singer of the Gap Band. With funk anthems like Outstanding and You Dropped a Bomb on Me, he became an icon of 80s R&B. His vocals, smooth and electrifying, were instantly recognizable. But behind the grooves and glitter, Charlie was losing everything to a crack addiction that nearly ended his life and career. Wilson's descent began slowly. At first it was recreational, a way to manage stress and numb emotional wounds. But before long, crack cocaine became his entire world. As his band's popularity began to fade, so did his self-control. He spent millions on drugs, burned through relationships, and lost his home. At one point, the Grammy-nominated star was living on the streets of Los Angeles, homeless, addicted, and forgotten. In 1995, his life hit bottom. With nowhere to turn, he checked himself into a rehabilitation center. There, he met Mahin Tat, a kind, compassionate social worker who saw through the broken exterior. She not only helped guide his recovery, she later became his wife. With her unwavering support, Charlie began to heal, not just physically, but spiritually. Clean, sober, and determined, Wilson made one of the most inspiring comebacks in modern music history. He returned to the spotlight with renewed purpose, collaborating with younger artists like Kanye West, Snoop Dogg, and Pharrell Williams. Hits like There Goes My Baby reminded the world of his vocal brilliance, but now it came with a depth forged in hardship. Charlie Wilson didn't just survive, he thrived. He used his platform to speak openly about addiction, cancer survival, and second chances. His journey stands in stark contrast to many tragic endings on this list. He was at the edge of death and chose to climb back. Wilson's story is a rare example of what happens when someone gets the help they need, the love they deserve, and the strength to fight for another day. He didn't let his addiction define him, he rewrote his ending. Old Dirty Bastard. Old Dirty Bastard-born Russell Tyrone Jones was chaos in human form. As a founding member of the Wu-Tang Clan, he brought an unpredictable genius that couldn't be replicated. His voice, offbeat, howling, often off-key, was more than a sound. It was a statement. He didn't follow rules. He broke them, laughed at them, and rewrote them in real time. But beneath the wild antics was a man spiraling into darkness, and no one stopped the fall. ODB's life was a tornado of contradictions. He was a loving father and a menace to public order, a rap icon and a walking cautionary tale. While his unpredictable stage presence made him a cult hero, his addiction to crack cocaine and prescription pills slowly dismantled everything he had built. His drug use wasn't a secret, it was a headline. He famously collected food stamps in a limo, got arrested multiple times, and often appeared intoxicated during performances or interviews. Mental health issues compounded his decline. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, he oscillated between manic brilliance and tragic instability. Legal troubles piled up. He fled from rehab, violated parole, and even served time behind bars. And though fans hoped for a comeback, the damage ran too deep. In 2004, just 2 days before his 36th birthday, Old Dirty Bastard collapsed and died in a New York recording studio. The autopsy revealed a deadly mixture of cocaine and tramadol. His sudden death wasn't just a loss, it was a brutally inevitable outcome of years of untreated pain and unrelenting pressure. ODB wasn't polished, nor did he ever pretend to be. He screamed truth even when no one wanted to hear it. His downfall wasn't from lack of talent, it was from a world that celebrated his madness but never cared to understand it. His legacy is tragic, not because he fell, but because we all saw it coming and still let it happen. Gucci Mane. Gucci Mane born. Radrick Davis became one of the most influential voices in Southern hip-hop, helping define the sound of Atlanta trap music. His gravel-throated flow, street-hardened lyrics, and relentless mixtape output made him a legend. But behind the fame, Gucci was quietly sinking into an abyss, powered by a lethal addiction to lean, a cocktail of codeine, cough syrup, and soda that nearly destroyed his life. At his peak in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Gucci dropped project after project. But fans also saw his frequent arrests, violent altercations, and increasingly erratic behavior. His face bloated, speech slurred, and mental state deteriorated publicly. He wasn't just using lean, he was drowning in it. Combined with pills and alcohol, it became a toxic brew that fueled wild rants, social media meltdowns, and physical confrontations. In 2014, Gucci hit rock bottom. He was sentenced to federal prison for firearm possession, and suddenly the flood of music stopped. Many believed it was the end of the road. But behind bars, something remarkable happened. With the lean gone and time to reflect, Gucci transformed. He began exercising, reading obsessively, and writing music with laser focus. By the time of his release in 2016, fans were stunned by his appearance, slimmer, healthier, and clearer than ever before. Rumors circulated that the new Gucci was a clone. But it wasn't science fiction, it was redemption. Gucci Mane got sober, married his longtime partner, Keishia Kawar, and rebuilt his empire. He published a memoir, became a father, and re-entered the rap game with renewed purpose. Gucci's story is rare in hip-hop, not just survival, but total reinvention. He didn't just return, he leveled up, proving that addiction doesn't have to be the final word. While his early years were marked by chaos, his second act is a blueprint for transformation. Foxy Brown. In the late 90s, Foxy Brown was unstoppable. With her razor-sharp bars, sultry image, and platinum-selling debut Il Na Na, she became one of the fiercest female voices in hip-hop. Before she was 20, Foxy was collaborating with Jay-Z, Nas, and The Firm, commanding both attention and respect in a male-dominated industry. But behind the headlines and Versace shades, Foxy was quietly unraveling, and no one seemed to notice until it was too late. Fame came fast, but peace never did. Foxy's early success masked deep-rooted personal issues, abandonment, betrayal, and physical trauma. To cope, she turned to opioids, including morphine and other painkillers, in a desperate attempt to numb emotional and physical pain. The drugs dulled not just her hurt, but her passion. Her performances declined. She disappeared from the spotlight for months at a time, battling demons most fans never knew she carried. In a cruel twist of fate, Foxy suffered sudden severe hearing loss in the early 2000s, a devastating blow for any artist, but especially one who lived by sound. At the height of her career, she could no longer hear her own voice. Though she underwent surgery to restore her hearing, the trauma lingered. Addiction continued to shadow her recovery, making it harder to reclaim her identity. Unlike others who chased the spotlight back, Foxy Brown's comeback was quiet. She didn't release another major hit, but she stayed alive, clean, and fiercely proud of her survival. She made appearances, supported younger female rappers, and reclaimed a sense of self-worth that wasn't defined by charts or fame. Foxy's journey is not one of complete collapse, nor of full-blown redemption. It's something more real. Her addiction didn't ruin her, but it stole years' opportunities and her health. She lives today as a survivor of an industry that often discards women after they've suffered in silence. And in that survival, there's strength. Boozy Badaz. Born Torrance Hatch Jr., came out of Baton Rouge with a voice like a gunshot, raw, unapologetic, and forged in street survival. His music was never about glamour. It was gritty storytelling, echoing the hard realities of Southern poverty, violence, and betrayal. But the truth Boozy told in his songs wasn't just fiction. It was his lived experience, and addiction played a massive role in his descent. Boozy began sipping lean, a codeine-based syrup mixed with soda, early in his career. For many in the South, it wasn't seen as dangerous at first. But Boozy's usage spiraled. He mixed it with pain pills and alcohol, chasing relief from paranoia, grief, and the psychological scars of a life spent dodging death. Over time, his voice began to slur, his energy dipped, and his health collapsed. The once sharp rapper appeared bloated and sluggish, his body crying out for mercy. Even prison didn't break the cycle. While serving time from 2009 to 2014 on drug and weapons charges and facing a murder indictment, he'd ultimately beat Boozy was still mentally tethered to the addiction that awaited him outside. After his release, he tried to reclaim his throne, but a grim diagnosis changed everything. His kidneys were failing. Doctors warned that one more cup of lean could kill him. Boozy took it as a wake-up call. He eventually got clean, underwent life-saving surgery, and doubled down on his music. While not mainstream-friendly, his lyrics became darker, more introspective, and brutally honest. He speaks candidly now about addiction, disease, and the temptations that nearly stole everything. Unlike many who pretend it never happened, Boozy owns every chapter. Still, his recovery has been complicated. He remains controversial often for his outspoken views. But in terms of addiction, Boozy is a man who lived through the nightmare and made it out damaged, but not destroyed. He rapped for survival, and in doing so managed to save himself from the same fate that claimed so many others on this list. Bobby DeBarge. Bobby DeBarge had one of the most haunting falsettos ever recorded. As the lead singer of the Motown group Switch, his voice floated effortlessly through classics like There'll Never Be and I Call Your Name. But behind his angelic tone was a man locked in torment, fighting a heroin addiction that would ultimately cut his life short before the world truly appreciated his genius. Born into a large, musically gifted yet deeply troubled family, Bobby grew up surrounded by instability and trauma. His father was abusive, and the scars of that violence lingered into adulthood. Like many who experience early emotional wounds, Bobby turned to drugs as a coping mechanism, finding in heroin both escape and eventual imprisonment. At the height of his career with Switch in the late 1970s, Bobby was already heavily addicted. Despite his talent, his erratic behavior and frequent disappearances from the studio became a problem. Rumors swirled of missed rehearsals, arguments with producers, and entire recording sessions wasted due to his drug use. His addiction wasn't just a personal issue, it was a wrecking ball smashing through everything he built. In the early 80s, Bobby tried to rebrand himself with his brothers in the group DeBarge, but his internal battles followed him. He spent time in prison on drug trafficking charges and emerged weaker physically and emotionally. Shortly after his release, Bobby was diagnosed with AIDS, a devastating blow both medically and socially in an era where the stigma was crushing. Bobby DeBarge died in 1995 at just 39 years old. His passing barely made headlines. But to those who knew his voice, his pain, and his potential, it was a seismic loss. He left behind a blueprint of raw, vulnerable soul, but also a cautionary tale of what happens when trauma goes untreated and talent is left unprotected. El DeBarge. El DeBarge was the golden child of the DeBarge dynasty, a gifted vocalist and songwriter with a falsetto so pure it seemed heaven-sent. With hits like Time Will Reveal All This Love and Rhythm of the Night, El became a breakout star in the 1980s. His voice was delicate, emotional, and unmistakably unique. But beneath the glitz of Motown fame lay deep wounds and an addiction that nearly silenced his music forever. El's childhood, like his brother Bobby's, was plagued by abuse control and dysfunction. The DeBarge household, while musically blessed, was emotionally chaotic. Fame did not bring healing, it amplified the pressure. By his early 20s, El began using crack cocaine and other stimulants not for thrills, but to quiet the storm inside. The result was a slow but steady unraveling of one of R&B's brightest stars. Recording sessions became inconsistent. He missed performances. Labels grew wary. Though fans adored his gentle voice, El was drifting away from the industry, buried under legal troubles and personal battles. Multiple arrests followed, along with several stints in jail. Each time there was hope for a comeback, but the drugs kept dragging him back. And yet, unlike many on this list, El's story hasn't ended in tragedy. In 2010, after years of silence, he released Second Chance, a poignant album that lived up to its title. The voice was still there, aged and more textured, but no less moving. It was a redemption arc the world didn't expect. While El still struggles with his past, he continues to make music and speak openly about his battles. He avoids grand declarations of recovery, instead focusing on daily survival and spiritual growth. His journey is far from linear, but it's filled with moments of clarity and courage. El DeBarge's legacy is more than a voice, it's a story of survival. A man who came from nothing, soared to everything, and nearly lost it all. He's still here, still singing, and still searching for peace between the notes. Bushwick Bill. Bushwick Bill-born Richard Stephen Shaw was the wild card of the legendary rap group Ghetto Boys. Though small in stature, he stood under 4 feet tall due to dwarfism. His voice presence and lyrical fury were enormous. Tracks like Mind, Playing Tricks on Me revealed a troubled soul hiding behind sharp rhymes and menacing delivery. But the real madness wasn't in the music, it was in his unraveling mind, fueled by hallucinogens, alcohol, and unchecked trauma. Raised between Jamaica and Texas, Bill struggled early with identity, health, and mental illness. As Ghetto Boys rose to fame in the late 80s and early 90s, Bill's erratic behavior became legendary. Drug use, especially PCP and alcohol, amplified his paranoia and delusions. He often claimed he was haunted by spirits, stalked by enemies, and plagued by forces no one else could see. His most infamous moment came in 1991 during a psychotic break. High on PCP, Bill shot himself in the eye during a domestic dispute. He survived but lost the eye, and a photo of him in the hospital became the cover for the group's next album, a haunting symbol of how deeply his art and addiction were intertwined. Afterward, Bill continued to battle substance abuse. His speech became slurred, his thoughts fragmented. Interviews grew increasingly incoherent. Though he tried to rejoin Ghetto Boys in later years, his health and mental state were in steep decline. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2019 and passed away soon after at just 52. Bushwick Bill's addiction wasn't glamorous, it was devastating. He lived in a body the world mocked, with a mind that never found peace. His brilliance was real, but so was his suffering. He left behind lyrics that still resonate, but also a cautionary tale of what happens when mental health and substance abuse are left untreated for too long. Margie Hendrix. Margie Hendrix had a voice that could rattle walls, fiery, raspy, and brimming with raw emotion. As a founding member of the Raylettes' Ray Charles's legendary backing group, Margie didn't just sing background, she lit every song on fire. Her standout performance on Nighttime Is the Right Time is still remembered for its blistering vocal exchange with Ray. But behind the power was a woman drowning in heartbreak, rejection, and drug dependency that ended her life far too soon. Born in Georgia in 1935, Margie was raised in the gospel tradition before stepping into the secular spotlight. When she joined Ray Charles's tour, her talent stood out immediately. Their musical chemistry quickly turned romantic, and soon Margie became one of Ray's closest companions on stage and off. They had a child together, but the relationship was tumultuous, plagued by jealousy, control, and mutual substance use. As Ray's heroin use intensified, so did Margie's. But unlike Charles, who continued performing and dominating charts, Margie's addiction consumed her career. Her fiery personality clashed with management. She missed rehearsals, argued during sessions, and gradually alienated herself from the band. In 1964, she was dismissed from the Raylettes and from Ray's life entirely. Margie attempted to launch a solo career, but the momentum was gone. Her records failed to chart, and her addiction worsened. Friends and collaborators described her as increasingly erratic, isolated, and consumed by bitterness. The woman once destined for soul stardom vanished into obscurity. In 1973, Margie Hendricks was found dead under unclear circumstances. Official reports are vague, but most believe her death was linked to prolonged drug abuse. She was just 38. No headlines marked her passing. No public tributes. A voice that once electrified stages was silenced with barely a whisper. Margie's downfall is one of the music industry's most overlooked tragedies. She stood beside greatness, but was discarded when she faltered. Her addiction didn't just kill her, it erased her from the narrative. But her voice, preserved on record, refuses to be forgotten. Sam Moore. Sam Moore. One half of the legendary duo Sam and Dave helped define the sound of 1960s soul. Their anthem Soul Man became a rallying cry during turbulent times and solidified Moore's place in music history. With a voice full of fire gospel roots and emotional resonance, Moore electrified stages worldwide. But while audiences saw an icon radiating joy and power, his personal life was collapsing under the weight of addiction. Moore's battle began during his rise to fame. Constant touring, the pressures of performance, and unresolved trauma led him to experiment with heroin and cocaine. What started as recreational use quickly escalated into full-blown dependency. For years, Moore performed high, numbing emotional pain with narcotics and just barely holding on professionally. By the early 70s, the cracks became visible. His partnership with Dave Prater disintegrated amid tension and unreliable behavior. Moore missed gigs, slurred lyrics, and faded from the spotlight. He became estranged from many in the industry and nearly overdosed multiple times. His addiction led him into financial ruin and near-total obscurity. But Sam Moore's story took a different turn. In the 1980s, with the support of his wife Joyce, he entered rehab and committed to sobriety. It was a grueling process, physically agonizing and mentally daunting, but it saved his life. Clean and clear, he made a triumphant return, collaborating with artists like Bruce Springsteen and Sting, and eventually being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Moore now advocates for recovery, frequently speaking about the dangers of substance abuse in the music industry. His survival is a rare outcome in a landscape littered with loss. While addiction nearly destroyed his gift, he chose redemption over ruin. Sam Moore is proof that even after decades of darkness, recovery is possible. His voice, once muffled by drugs, now sings a new song, one of hope, humility, and second chances. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard was a founding member of the Supremes, the most successful girl group in music history. Before Diana Ross became the face of Motown's crown jewel, it was Florence's powerhouse vocals that anchored their harmonies and energized early performances. But as fame swelled, so did internal conflicts, and Ballard was eventually cast aside, triggering a downward spiral fueled by addiction and grief. Ballard's early years were marked by both talent and tragedy. Raised in Detroit, she found solace in singing, and by her teens, she was performing with what would become the Supremes. But the spotlight quickly narrowed around Ross, and Florence, known for her strong personality and resistance to Berry Gordy's control, was increasingly marginalized. By 1967, Ballard had been replaced in the group she helped build. The fallout was devastating. She received a modest settlement and no royalties, leaving her financially unstable. With 3 children to support and no career safety net, Florence fell into a deep depression. Alcohol became her escape, a way to numb the betrayal and heartbreak. Her weight fluctuated, her voice faded, and her spirit dimmed. She attempted a solo career, but with little support or promotion, the albums flopped. She made brief returns to local performances in Detroit, but never regained the national stage. By the late 70s, Ballard was living in public housing and relying on welfare. Her final years were marked by illness and exhaustion. On February 22, 1976, Florence Ballard died of cardiac arrest at just 32 years old. Years of emotional devastation, addiction, and poverty had taken their toll. At her funeral, many of the Motown stars who once shared the stage with her were notably absent. Florence Ballard's story is one of betrayal, systemic exploitation, and a cruel fall from grace. Her addiction didn't begin with drugs. It began with being discarded. Her voice once made the world dance, but when she needed help, the industry turned its back. Today, she's remembered not just as a supreme, but as a symbol of what happens when talent is treated as disposable. Junior Parker. Junior Parker wasn't loud, flamboyant, or controversial. He didn't need to be. His voice, smooth, soulful, and soft like satin, carried enough power on its own. With hits like Next Time You See Me and Driving Wheel, Parker became a staple of the 1950s and 60s blues scene. He blended gospel roots with uptown R&B in a way that predated and influenced soul music as we know it. But despite his innovation and talent, Parker's career and life were quietly eroded by addiction and physical decline. Born in Mississippi and raised in Memphis, Parker came up in the same circles as B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland. He was known for his smooth showmanship and unique phrasing, which made him a favorite among both blues lovers and early rock audiences. Yet fame never fully caught up to him. The grueling tour life, lack of mainstream recognition, and chronic health problems wore him down. Parker didn't engage in wild public meltdowns like many others on this list. His addiction to prescription painkillers and sedatives was quiet, personal, and born out of necessity. Attempts to manage illness, stress, and the physical toll of non-stop performing. As years passed, the glow of his early success dimmed. Gigs slowed down. Albums didn't sell like they used to. He faded from the spotlight with barely a whisper. By the late 1960s, Junior Parker was struggling to maintain both his health and his voice. In 1971, he died during surgery to remove a brain tumor at just 39 years old. His addiction may not have been the direct cause, but it unquestionably weakened his body and dulled his shine long before the illness took him. Junior Parker's legacy is a quiet one, but it shouldn't be. He helped shape modern soul and blues, and his story reflects the unspoken truth about addiction. Not all of it is flashy. Sometimes it's subtle, creeping in behind the scenes and stealing lives while no one's watching. Sonny Clark. Sonny Clark wasn't a household name, but in the jazz world he was revered. A pianist with impeccable timing and emotional depth. Clark was a key figure in the hard bop era, playing alongside icons like John Coltrane, Art Farmer, and Dexter Gordon. His compositions like Cool Struttin' and Blue Miner are staples in jazz circles, admired for their grace swing and subtle tension. But Clark's brilliance was matched by his self-destruction. Heroin, the ever-present shadow of mid-century jazz, would take his life before the world truly caught on. Born in Pennsylvania in 1931, Sonny moved to California and later New York, immersing himself in the bebop revolution. As a sideman and leader, his work was lauded for its clarity and soulfulness. But life on the jazz scene in the 1950s was perilous racial discrimination, financial instability, and grueling schedules pushed many toward escape. For Clark, heroin became that exit. Despite his growing reputation, Clark's personal life was marked by instability. He frequently missed studio sessions, borrowed money he couldn't repay, and was often found nodding off backstage. Fellow musicians respected his talent but feared his decline. He'd show up late, frail and trembling, but once at the piano, he'd play with a passion that silenced every doubt in the room. Clark was in and out of jail and rehab. At times, he seemed determined to fight his way back, but the cycle always returned. By 1963, at just 31 years old, Sonny Clark was dead. The official cause, a heroin overdose, though liver and kidney failure were also noted. He died in obscurity without fanfare, his brilliance buried under the weight of addiction. Sonny Clark's name isn't as well known as Miles or Monk, but his loss cuts just as deep. He was one of those rare artists who could tell a lifetime story in a single chorus, and yet couldn't write his own ending. In jazz, his legacy lives on in every soulful chord and bittersweet silence between notes. These 25 stories are not just tales of addiction. They are cautionary truths about how pain, pressure, and silence can destroy even the most iconic talents. From jazz legends to hip-hop pioneers, each artist left behind more than music. They left warnings we still haven't learned from. So now we ask, who else is suffering behind the spotlight? And why does the industry keep failing them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should we be celebrating the legacy or confronting the neglect? Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more untold stories that demand to be heard.